Welcome back and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Now to our discussion tonight, which is centered on the education sector. Schools opened on Monday for the 2025 academic calendar amid a storm of challenges. Teacher shortages, incomplete classrooms, delayed funds, and nationwide safety concerns, including a shortage of textbooks in various learning institutions. This as parents, students, and learners are bracing for that grade 9 transition under the CBC. So is education at crossroads? Ahead of the discussion, let's just set the pace by taking a look at where we are at so far in terms of grade 9 classrooms. Now, according to the Education Ministry, they have mentioned that 3,000 classrooms so far have been completed under the National Government Constituency Development Fund, and the Ministry of Education directly has so far constructed 10,500 classrooms. Remember, the total number of classrooms that the government was planning to construct is 16,000. So if you add those numbers, we have a shortage of about 2,500 classrooms, and that's why the ministry says it is 93% complete. But questions arise: what happens to the learners who are under the 7%, those who haven't had their classrooms constructed already? So as I mentioned, the classrooms yet to be constructed are 2,500. That's according to the ministry. Let's take a look at yet another board touching on the 25 school calendar, and the school capitation for this academic calendar totals to 96.8 billion shillings, where term 1, we expect the ministry to disburse roughly 48.3 billion, translating to 50% of the total sum. In term 2, we expect the school capitation amount to be disbursed. That is 29 billion Kenya shillings, roughly 30% of the total capitation amount. And term 3, the ministry will release 19.4 billion shillings, translating to 20% of the total capitation funds. Over to the next board, taking a look at the capitation in terms of where they will go. The primary, the junior secondary, and the secondary schools in the country. For primary, 4.1 billion has been allocated in terms of the disbursements around capitation. Junior secondary school, 15.3 billion. And in secondary school, we're talking about 28.9 billion shillings, as you can see. So the total term 1 disbursement, or rather the total disbursement coming to 48.3 billion shillings in terms of the term 1 disbursement plan. To yet another board where teacher staffing has been concern rather in terms of junior secondary school teachers. There has been a shortage of science teachers as well, which has been said time and time again. But the ministry has mentioned that qualified primary school teachers will be deployed to junior secondary schools, and equally when it comes to ensuring there's adequate staffing, the ministry has ensured that they will take a look at the numbers of teachers who are designated to junior secondary schools to ensure that smooth transition. Now, as I mentioned, we're set to have a discussion centered on the state of education in the country. A lot of challenges: teacher shortages, incomplete classrooms, delayed funds, and nationwide safety concerns. This, of course, coming as parents, students, and educators brace for that grade 9 transition under the competency-based curriculum. So is education at a crossroads? Joining me to shed light on several issues and several questions arising that beleaguer the education sector. In studio, I'm joined by 2 gentlemen and 1 lady. Allow me to introduce them. On my immediate right, Dr. Tom Kuja. He's an educationist and researcher. Karibu sana to our studios. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Asante for your time. Equally joined by Rose Eteye, who is the CEO of the Kenya Private Schools Association. Madam, thank you so much for your time. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Equally joined by Dr. Julius Otundo, who is the head of department at the education faculty at Riara University. Is equally an educationist. Karibu sana, Daktari. Pleasure to have you with us, lady and gentlemen. Let's just take a look at what the Basic Education Principal Secretary, Dr. Belio Kipsang, had to say about that grade 9 transition in terms of the classrooms that are still being built. As I mentioned, 93% are complete. So what happens to the 7%? When will they be complete? Let's just listen in to what the PS had to say.
Today, we had our first day of grade 9. First lesson, first encounter, first contact with the teachers and with the pupils at that particular level. For us to be able to adequately settle our children, when we did an assessment, we realized that we needed 16,000 classrooms to be able to settle our children in grade 9. And when we looked at resources, looked at the way that we were going to do it, we engaged with our members of parliament, the National Assembly. We told them that we wanted to partner in developing classrooms. Together with our other development partners, we as Ministry of Education, we said that we were going to do 11,000 classrooms, and CDF would do for us the remainder of 5,000 classrooms. I would want to say that so far, CDF has done for us 3,000 classrooms, which are ready and available for use. There are still another 2,000 at various levels of development. CDF has a more elaborate way of approvals and going through the processes. The bureaucracies are slightly higher than what we have as Ministry of Education. But notwithstanding, they have already done 3,000 classrooms. We at the Ministry of Education, as of this morning, we have done 10,500 classrooms ready out of the 11,000 that we were to do. And by end of, within the next 5-6 days, we should have concluded our 11,000 classrooms. All transitions that we always do, they will always be teething problems. These ones, it is not that we didn't project it, we knew that there were going to be challenges, but we were consolidating resources to ensure that we have resources so that within this short time of the next 30 days, we make sure that we don't disrupt learning. We work within the resources that is available to us so that our children do not suffer.
Well, Dr. Belio Kipsang right there a little bit earlier on, just highlighting the steps they're taking as a ministry to ensure that that grade 9 transition is smooth. But there are definitely teething challenges. We saw a rush to create space for grade 9 learners who are grappling with a shortage of classrooms, and the government says only 2,500 classes are yet to be constructed, with the remaining classes set to be done in the month. So let me start with you, Dr. Kuja, since you're right next to me. For lack of a better word, the grade 9 transition seems to be a quagmire. The government gave a commitment that the transition will proceed smoothly. As an educationist, what do you make of the transition so far? Is the journey as seamless as promised?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jesse. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you very much, my panelists. First and foremost, you know, as education, we've argued before that the aspect of domiciling grade 9 to their respective primary school was a wrong move. Why? Because we are looking at currently the creation of an extra class that is now there in our various secondary schools. And if you look at the competency, the curriculum-based establishment in our respective secondary schools, you will realize that it is not overloaded now. There's a little workload from teachers. At the same time, there are other extra classrooms that includes our lab, chemistry labs, biology laboratories, and computer laboratories. So we advise that these particular students would then move to this particular secondary school so that they enjoy the benefits of the physical infrastructure, including the competency of the human resource capabilities in those particular schools. Okay. But now when you domicile these particular students to grade 9, their respective primary school, that is already struggling to hold them in terms of physical resources, and we've just seen the PSA that they have done 93. So if that is true, And with what we are seeing and what we are hearing, then there's some level of inconsistency from what they are telling us.
Okay. So you're of the idea that grade 9 should have been domiciled in secondary schools?
Yes, so that we use the existing resources laboratories promptly, so that these particular students get the quality they deserve. And I've always argued, it's not about shifting the system. It is about, we are not changing the content. We are not changing the content. The content that was supposed to be taught in the various primary school will still be taught in secondary school. But this time round, they'll be enjoying the space that includes the physical infrastructure and the teachers, because the curriculum-based establishment is not distressed in secondary schools as per now.
Okay, Madam CEO, as you come in, let's talk about the private schools, because they equally have a role in ensuring the success of CBC as a curriculum. Well, what's the situation like in terms of the grade 9 transition? Is it a little bit more seamless when it comes to the private schools? And equally, give your take on what we're seeing in public schools across the country.
Okay, thank you so much. First is to welcome back our children from the holiday, and to just appreciate the parents and all the stakeholders that have ensured that our children are back in school safely, because so far we have not had any incidents or accident that has happened as regards to our children. Yeah. First, I want to also appreciate what the government has done so far in regards to preparedness for grade 9, while we also appreciate that there are some issues that need to be addressed. The issue of classrooms, that is outlining that it's only 93% that has been done. We are looking at the teachers that are being hired. We still have a problem with the ratio of teacher to student. We still have the issue of textbooks, which there's a public outcry. Today I was reading in the papers that the prices are too high, they're costly in terms of affording these books. And the capitation, which sometimes, as we appreciate that the capitation is there, the problem is sometimes this money comes very late for the school. So the biggest question is, at what time then should the teachers or the head teachers prepare with these finances? When they come maybe at the end of June, well, the first term begins in January, can then the budget, when the budget is being done, can there be a provision where we work with the school calendar rather than working with the finance calendar to ensure that these funds are disbursed early enough? Like the capitation should be disbursed at least in December, so that as we open the schools in January, the children already have, the schools already have these finances to run the school. However, on the private schools, I wish to confirm to the public that we are well prepared for grade 9. We are not trying to figure it out. We are well prepared. Our classes are in place for the grade 9. Immediately, the CBC and the junior school was out. Our schools ran to prepare for grade 9. So our infrastructure is in place. We have modern classrooms that are in place. We have the state-of-the-art laboratories that are in place. So in that, we are not struggling at all. I can assure the public that the private school is the place to be and to ensure that quality is advanced. Okay. Secondly, also on the issue of textbooks, we have, as private schools, invested a lot as schools to ensure that we acquire these textbooks and ensure that the process is seamless. Okay. And also just running around to ensure that the teachers are retooled and also parental engagement is done.
So a lot is ongoing. We'll get to that textbooks issue, because it seems there's an outcry from parents who have learners in private institutions, since they have to purchase these books and they're not finding them in the bookshops. But as we cross over to you, Daktari, a lot has been said in terms of the challenges or teething problems around CBC. How do we solve these glaring disparities? Because education is thought as the greatest equalizer. So that grade 9 learner who is in a school that doesn't have adequate infrastructure is supposed to compete with that learner who is in a private school who have adequate infrastructure, laboratories are in place and whatnot, teachers. How do we ensure these glaring disparities are sorted once and for all?
Thank you, Jesse. First, to everyone, Happy New Year to the public and to my panelists here. First, I am a proponent, a very strong proponent. In fact, when I sit here, I have a big smile. And the big smile is because I'm the strongest proponent of CBC. And for me, whether we are at 90, 93% or even less, I want to say that where we are is a great success.
Okay.
That is number one. Because this is one of the curriculum that I really envisioned that it should ever work.
So we shouldn't throw the baby
No,
with
we
the
shouldn't.
bathwater.
We shouldn't. And I will tell you why we shouldn't. In fact, we are at a very good pace. After all, 93% is exceeding expectations. We start from there.
Okay.
Number two, we should not worry about the classes that are not constructed, because every school that we have in this country in the name of a public school is sponsored by a church. Let all those church halls be used for classes, because churches are only serving on Sundays only. So the nearest church should be able to provide space for the grade 9s. They carry their desks there, they serve, they are there, and then they learn. And after all, learning is not even about these walls. In as far as the walls are important, but I look at learning very differently. Number two, the issue of domiciling the junior school in primary. You know, we lost the concept at some point. The junior school was initially in primary. When you look at the basic education framework, we had Tier 1 early years. Early years is from grade 1 to, PP1 to grade 3. Then we have Tier 2, middle school. And middle school is now having the aspect of upper primary and junior school. So the issue there is just because we were trying to lose the basic framework. But the basic framework was well drawn that junior school is supposed to be domiciled in primary section.
But he argues from a point of, more infrastructure.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
If you look at the curriculum that we have for junior school coming down, in as far as it is fancy to have laboratories, honestly, if you analyze it, you have very little that students will go and sit in that structure to use. In fact, if you do the analysis of like private schools that have established them, those students have used only about 10% of that infrastructure. Because much of what can be done, part of it can be done in the classroom, part of it can be done outside the classroom. So it's a matter of innovation to the extent that you can have your laboratory under a tree, and it works. Because you just need to look at what experiences are the learners supposed to go through, as opposed to these materials, we are calling them laboratories. When you also analyze critically, the infrastructure that was meant to be constructed, if the students had gone to senior schools, it would have costed us more as opposed to what we have in primary, because you realize that grade 8 and 7, those classrooms already existed. So the only problem was to fix grade 9. Unlike when we would have fixed how many classrooms? 2 of them. Yeah, okay. So that would have been more expensive. All right. In regard to teachers,
we'll get to the teachers issue.
We'll get to the teachers.
Yes.
But so for me, if you asked me, I think we are not at a serious crossroad. After all, people had thought CBC would collapse. It can't, and it wouldn't. Now we are far ahead. But I want to challenge my colleagues in private. While we are looking for money to construct classrooms, I challenge private schools to adopt public schools. If every private school gave us 10,000 shillings only, we would construct how many classrooms? That is public donation. St. Andrew's Turi fees is 1.2 million for one student. Give us one fees for one student to construct one classroom.
But why should you donate if people are paying tax?
Tax is good. But at the same time, we even give tithe in church.
Okay.
Why can't we tithe in education?
Interesting. Madam CEO, what do you think of that briefly?
Thank you so much, Daktari. I wish to challenge Daktari here that there's this notion that private schools are only for the rich or for those that are well-abled. But I want to let us know that actually in our private schools, we host so many underprivileged children. And most of these proprietors are actually digging deep into their pockets to cater and support for these children. So we do not know where these 10,000 will actually come from.
Yes,
so your plate is full.
Yes,
our plate is already full.
Do we have data to that?
Okay.
Because you see, these are qualitative statements.
All right.
We need data. and say that we have this number of students we are catering for, this is the cost of their education.
Yeah, okay.
You get.
Well, we'll get to the devil is in the detail, as they say. But let me defend briefly. Dr. Kujas, I come to you.
Yes.
And I'd like all of you to give your input on this, because there's some who think that the Kenya Primary School Education Assessment, KPSEA, is a little bit of, should be phased out. They're questioning the professional purpose the KPSEA serves. And even as you give us your take, it's proper to know that parents of learners who sat for the KPSEA are urged to send their children to grade 7 without waiting for results. According to the government, transition to JSS is automatic under that 100 transition policy. So what's your take on KPSEA? At the end of the day, is it truly serving its purpose? Should it be phased out?
Well, you know, the fact that we have KPSEA in the CBC, it serves a purpose. That's the first thing. And, you know, this is an evaluation process, and of course, a summative one. And, you know, telling a student probably to transit to grade 7 without necessarily having the results, to some extent, is demoralizing, okay? Yeah. It is demoralizing because now the student in this particular case is moving to another grade but does not have the results at hand. The student does not know how she or he has performed. Now, if KPSEA, for example, will serve a purpose of being used cumulatively for purpose of transitioning, that is, it will be used for grade 9s moving to grade 10s, which is going to be hosted in secondary school, that will serve the purpose. Because now they say, for example, that they'll use the cumulative grade of the student as the student progresses to the next level. So up to that particular extent, if it is going to be used to place this particular student, then it's going to serve the purpose. But curriculum professionals should tell us, because he's a proponent of this particular discussion and discourse with regard to curriculum, whether it serves the purpose at this particular point. How do you allow students to transit to another grade without necessarily presenting results to this particular student?
Interesting.
Yes.
Sorry.
I think the concept of assessment should be separated from the concept of the previous connotation of an examination. And I want to link this, first of all, to other forms of curricula. When you look at the British national curriculum, it has a checkpoint. What does that mean? Just to assess the progress of learning. So KPSEA is also in that concept.
Okay.
It doesn't have to have a timeline to say we must release results on this day, because it's about the aspect of the learning progress. It's not like a summative assessment to assess, it's just about to measure. Like if you dress and you check yourself in the mirror. So we are mirroring out and seeing that if we check on the progress of learning, can we address the gaps?
Okay.
Where I sit even at a faculty in a university, one of the things we do, you must be able to keep on continually assess your students to see where are the gaps, how do I address the gaps. That's the essence of a KPSEA. It is not even for the purpose of transition.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
And after all, the results, when they come out, they're supposed to be in the context of qualitative analysis. And this qualitative analysis is to address an existing gap. And that is why KPSEA is very important. And not only that, we have other assessments down here below. Why do we need them? Because you cannot run an education program without having checkpoints. You have to keep checking. Where are we? What are we doing right? What are we not doing right? Because remember, we are dealing with competencies. So at every stage, how are the competencies being addressed?
All right.
How are the issues of the principles being addressed? The issues around the values being addressed? That is what KPSEA actually analyzes. Holistically, the progress of learning.
Okay. Rose, briefly.
Just to comment on what Daktari has said, you know, the kind of information Daktari has is not with the parents. You know, he has a lot of content about KPSEA, evaluation and assessment, but the kind of noise that we are seeing on TV, on social medias, and any other media platform is because the parents and the student don't have this particular information. So I also feel that public participation involving parents, and especially with regard to assessment and those particular levels and steps that we undertake in this particular CBC is very, very much important. So, for example, if, for example, this particular information you are sharing with us, parent had it, then the kind of noise that we are hearing now could not have had that particular noise. So it's also important to also tell parents that this particular assessment is just to check the progress of the students, and it's not an exam. And it's not an exam, because I don't know the distinction between an assessment and an exam. You see, so there's a thin line there.
Maybe a quick response to that, to Dr. is that, like now we have this program running. How many parents are watching? That is number one. Number two, there is a document in every school, public and private, on parental engagement. And so basically, that's the responsibility of the managers of schools. If you walk in any primary, any school today, that policy document is there. And it highlights a whole timetable, a whole calendar of events on what you need to do from end to end. So what do I say? The responsibility here possibly is not lying at the top. It lies at the school level. How does the school engage parents? Because it's happening very well when it comes to private schools. Because the managers of schools are very keen to ensure that happens. But for our public counterparts, I want to challenge all the heads of schools to settle down in their schools and engage parents.
Briefly, before we talk about teachers, Rose.
I think the greatest problem, just as Dr. has said, is we are coming from a system where people or the public was used to results, KCPE results, and where they now take and celebrate the results just because there's a performance of A, B, and C and stuff. Now, we are looking at a difference in KPSEA where that is no longer there. We are not looking at it like this child has performed better than this. We are just looking to assess and to check on any areas that need improvement, just like Dr. has said. But again, the public need not to worry about KPSEA or anything, because we are having 100% transition. So I heard that the parents were asking, should we now admit our children, and yet the results are not out? Why should we worry, and yet you already have 100% transition? So these results, as much as they're going to help us check on our performance and improve on areas that need improvement, we need to know that they need not to make us to worry on whether we should admit back our children or not.
Now there seems to be a glaring shortage of qualified teachers, particularly in science subjects, and many junior secondary schools remain understaffed. According to TSC, the government has allocated funding for recruitment of an additional teachers to teach grade 7, 8, and 9. However, the grim reality is that this will only add 1 teacher per school on average, when you do the math. So it's clear that we have a crisis on our hands when it comes to the pupil to teacher ratio. Let's start with you, Dr. Ikuja. How best should we address this challenge?
Yes, thank you, Jesse. Now, from the previous statements made by the Minister of Education, they had indicated that qualified teachers within the primary setup would be promoted to handle the JSS classes. And on this one, on teacher recruitment, I would want to commend the government. They have tried. This is the only time we are seeing the highest number of teachers getting engaged to address the instruction gap that already existed. So it is true also there was a problem with the lack of teachers, especially the science teachers. But as the CEO of the Teacher Service Commission indicated to Parliament that there was shortage, I think that was addressed, because the recent recruitment, the science teachers were much far ahead of their counterparts, so that they address this particular gap. So once the teachers who teach primary schools have been promoted to teach JSS, and then there's an additional teacher that has been employed to teach grade 9, I think that particular teacher-student ratio should have been addressed. Because now we are looking at the teaching, the teachers who are now compact in terms of, you're seeing, we have science teachers, language teachers, and we also have arts teachers. So with that, then we are able to address and teach the learning areas that already have.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Madam Rose, from outside looking in, let's talk about the quality of education, especially under public schools, because many teachers working under junior secondary schools, we've heard that they lack subject-specific qualifications that are needed. Not just that, the criteria to identify schools to teach sciences, arts, is it social sciences or physical education, has not been released yet. So how do we overcome this confusion to ensure that no child is left behind?
Thank you so much. I think this should actually not bring us a confusion as a nation, as we are right now. We say that CBC should promote vocational and technical training, and that is why we see a large investment in the technical colleges. Now, my ask or my request or my honest opinion will be TSC can work with the vocational training institutes. We have students who are already technocrats in some of these subjects. Yes, we realize that they may not have the pedagogy aspect of learning. Can the TSC then get these students out, take them through a training of at least 3 to 6 months to just train on pedagogy and release them to have to teach in this subject, in these schools, instead of having to struggle and say we only have students coming from university having only two subjects, because as it is right now, university students are only being trained for 2 subjects. Can we also allow the vocational training students to come in and be given the pedagogy to allow them to teach in these junior schools and even the senior schools?
Okay, interesting. Dr. Ari, well, what's your take on this teacher student shortage? Because the ratio is it 42:1? And of course, we're way above that. Huh?
I think yes or no. Yes, it's at 1 to 42. But if you go to some countries, one of them is South Africa, you have 1 to 80, but the models they use for teaching is quite different.
Okay.
Possibly what we need to equip our teachers here is methodology on teaching large classes. I personally served as a classroom teacher, and I would handle comfortably 80 because I learned pedagogies earlier. So even without worrying about the teachers who are not available, the ones we have at the moment, they just need to be trained on how to handle the methodologies to handle large classes. For example, if you are using project-based learning, problem-based, research-based, you will handle extremely large classes. So what teachers need to be helped is how do they ensure that they are able to handle large classes. TSC is very strategic. Why is it strategic? We are going to have 3 classes in senior school, meaning that we would have 1 class with a huge number of teachers that need to be dropped back to junior schools. So it's a matter of data being taken, I am certain, so that some of the teachers are likely to be dropped back to junior schools. Now come to a suggestion of teachers from technical training colleges. It's a good suggestion, but the worry is that teaching as a noble profession has so many connotations. It starts with values. Number 1, not even pedagogy, values. The value system is very critical for a teacher. And many people who have done other courses possibly do not possess the value systems that can help them to handle what we call classroom teaching, and particularly learner interaction. So the value system for me is what counts. And so that's what I would say, that in the balancing of the teachers that we already have, I am certain that if teachers who are in senior schools, I'll give an example. A school like, say, Nairobi School has about 16 streams of Form 1 or more. So if all those are how many teachers? Those are like 50 teachers plus. If they were dropped to come to junior schools, we'll sort out this problem. So, and I'm sure that that mathematics is somehow being done by the Teacher Service Commission. So let's worry less and just suggest more. And then also shift learning. If you look at the context of CBC, honestly, I will tell you, I don't need a student in class from 8 to 4 o'clock. I don't need. The critical concept is that I can comfortably operate like the case of tropical timetables, where we have even shift learning, where some students are in class up to this particular time for this session. Others go outside for an activity, because things like physical education are all integrated. Others go out for agriculture. Then others join in to be assisted. And then when you look also at the context of this curriculum, it is not about the teacher knowing the content. It is more about the experientials that the learners go through. I am certain that what you guys are doing here, like these guys, possibly they learned, but it is not the content they are using here. It is the experience of photographing, videography, and all that. So that experiential approach will then help me as a teacher who trained in 2 subjects, but can also add another one, because it's an experiential approach. And through that kind of experiential learning, we should be able to balance, bring in the teacher balance. Because I will tell you, Jesse, if the government decided to ensure that we have a ratio of 1 to 25, I will tell you for free, this government will collapse. The education will take everything. Any other public servants will not even get salaries.
Okay.
Yeah, so there needs to be a bit of innovation.
We manage the little we have.
And also head teachers need to go back to class, because I see head teachers not teaching, it is ridiculous according to me.
Okay.
In private schools, I know that cannot happen. So if you're not going to class, how many head teachers do we have in these schools? And they don't go to class. They would also narrow down part of this gap. And in many schools, to be honest, many of the head teachers are out in meetings that are neither here nor there, and still complaining of having less teachers in their schools.
We get you. Interesting challenge to the head teachers out there. Allow us to pay our bills. We need to take a short commercial break. But as we come back, we continue with our riveting discussion right here on the state of education in the country. We've talked about the grade 9 transition, the classrooms, teacher shortage. When we come back, we'll take a look at the delay in capitation and what that means in terms of net effect. Equally, the CBC book shortage, we'll try and delve deeper into that, even as we look at what the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms had to say about CBC and its implementation. We'll take that break. We'll be back in a few.
Dental Tips, brought to you by Sensodyne.